This is Pixelated Audio, episode 133, featuring hover racing. Welcome back to Pixelated Audio, a podcast focusing on game audio, its history, and the people behind it.
We're your hosts. I'm Gene, and this is Brian, and today we're going to be listening to the music from an indie game for the Sony PlayStation, believe it or not, titled Hover Racing.
Yes, that track that brought us in was called A North Breeze, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori. And it's really a nice breezy track, yeah.
It's a nice chill jam, yeah. A lot of that mid-90s dance stuff, I grew up listening to it a ton. It's right up my alley.
Yeah, I mean, this was like in the PlayStation's kind of prime, right? Well, towards the end. But like this music was like the kind of defined the PlayStation, I think. And
oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, dance music was sort of like, I think, the bridge between the perception of games being for children and more like teens. The PlayStation really leaned into that whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is something that we've been planning on doing for a little while. The reason why we decided on choosing hover racing was actually because of one of our more silent but in the background team members, Electric Boogaloo. You know, he's a longtime listener, very close friend of the show. All the music was directly recorded from his US PlayStation model SCPH1001.
Yeah, it's one of the earlier models of the PlayStation, not the launch model, but I think shortly after.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. So we're hearing hardware recording. Like there's some, real natural artifacts in the music, which make it all the more special to kind of listen to. So again, Electric Boogaloo, thank you very much. And let's just get right into it. Hover Racing is a futuristic racer in the style of F-Zero or kind of Wipeout. Those were hot during the day.
Yeah. Fast League Racing is one that's relatively recent.
Right, yeah. But that was the kind of defining thing. Like, I was a real big fan of like Jet Moto, and even though that was different, it has that just kind of like hover kind of racing, some kind of like something without wheels that's running across tracks.
You're in some kind of hovercraft in suspended tracks over like space or
exactly,
the ocean, right? Something kind of atmospheric that's not really a real place.
Right. Now, what makes this game unique is that it was created using Sony's Net Yaroze platform, which was a low-cost development platform for hobbyists to create their own games. The game was developed between April and November of 1997 by a group of Japanese university students, and that's key here because it was led by designer Tomokazu Sato with music by Hiroaki Ohmori and also Tohru Kawakami. It was submitted to Dengeki O Net Yaroze Awards in January of 1998, where it won Silver Prize and was later distributed in North America on issue 2.2 of PlayStation Underground in quarter 2 of 1998. And it also appeared on PlayStation Pure Club Volume 12 and Japan's Dengeki PlayStation D6 demo disc. So I played a lot of the PlayStation Underground stuff. That was a very hot way. Like, you know, diskettes were kind of a thing of the past. So getting CDs you could play like in the mail or, you know, from, you know, 7-Eleven or wherever you bought your magazines. Like that was a huge deal. And those demo discs were actually what kind of spawned me to discover a lot of games that I never would have played.
See, I played a lot of demo discs, but it was the really like big stuff. Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, Medieval.
Well, I played that too.
Yeah, I mean, like, I never played any of this. Actually, it wasn't until we started planning the show that I'd even really heard of Net Yaroze. It was like not a thing for me.
See, for me, I was in high school when the Net Yaroze was, you know, started coming out and getting into magazines. They would mention it and talk about it, and it was always my dream to like. I really envied all of the people that could afford, you know, working on this stuff, and I was just like, oh man, that's like the dream. Like I wish I could do that. You know, it never materialized because I was, you know, a broke kid in high school. But like, I followed the Net Yaroze over kind of its lifespan. I went to the website and went to all this stuff. We'll talk more about the platform as we get into the show, but Hover Racing was made by a team of like a dozen people covering music backgrounds and graphics.
Yeah, it's one of those games that we don't have the full story about it, but we do know that the core team met at Osaka Prefecture University. That's where they started working on games, we think. Before working on Hover Racing, the core team worked on a small indie adventure game called Yakuta or Mansion for the FM Towns, and then re-released it as Yakuta Plus or Super Mansion on the Net Yaroze platform. It's, you know, some minor updates, better frame rate, some bug fixes, that sort of thing. It was kind of like this, you walk a character around a mansion, pick up items, think like a non-violent Alone in the Dark kind of thing. It was pretty cool, but very clearly like a tech demo-y sort of thing. And according to the personal website of the lead developer, Tomokazu Sato, he studied at the university in Japan from 95 to 99, earned a bachelor's of engineering, went on to earn his master's and doctorate, and is currently a professor of data science at Shiga University. He's done research in a lot of different areas like computer vision, augmented reality, interactive modeling, omnidirectional vision. So if you know like LiDAR and stuff that autonomous vehicles use, that sort of thing. He's a very talented programmer and scientist, but I don't think he really worked on games after this. So it was kind of like just experimenting with it during his college years.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
So the composers of the game, we've never talked about them before on the show, but Hiroaki Ohmori did all the sound effects, machine design, 3D modeling, according to the archive staff page. And after Hover Racing, he went on to do freelance composition and arrangement from 2001 to 2004 for TV commercials, radio programs, and so on. He still works on music under the name Toneflow or Flicker Tone, and released an album in 2011 called Sound on the Inner Planet. We'll put a link in the show notes to that. And he's currently COO of Exim, a firm based on helping companies with their digital marketing growth. The second composer, Tohru Kawakami, only worked on one track, and it was kind of like a dual effort. We're not exactly sure, but we could really find out more information on him. So we did kind of take the plunge and try to contact Ohmori-san, but that kind of didn't end up happening. So we didn't hear anything back in time for the episode. So it would have been interesting.
Yeah, if we have any notes from him afterwards, we'll post it either in the the post for the show or in a postscript kind of thing. It is cool that he worked on music afterwards. He definitely seems like a bit of a hobbyist musician, like, not a full-time. I looked up his firm. It's sort of like it's a marketing firm. He's a creative dude, but the music's still kind of going on the side, so that's nice. But this is definitely not a crew of professional seasoned game developers that went on to become famous in the industry or anything like that.
And I think that's what makes the soundtrack kind of so endearing, right? Is that it wasn't made by a AAA team. It was made by kind of like this guy and like some of his college buddies, So
yeah, I feel like this is probably the third or fourth time on the show we've talked about some of these like smaller communities, like Click and Play, DOS, indie games, and what is it called? Newgrounds. There's sort of like this early entry level where people eventually kind of grow into becoming professionals, but seeing how things are before they get to that level is kind of cool too from time to time.
Right. You can see kind of like that creative flower start to bloom.
Exactly, yeah.
Anyways, let's jump right into our next track here. This is called Laser Wind, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori. That was Laser Wind, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori for hover racing on the Net Yaroze platform for Sony PlayStation.
It's a nice little mid-tempo tune. You know, I think the soundtrack kind of lives in this area. There's some faster tunes, some slower tunes. They also mostly use the same sample library. This one in particular has kind of a weird thing you might have noticed as you were listening. There's kind of this clicking noise.
Especially if you had headphones on, it's really obvious.
Yeah, so like every time that little beep sound effect plays, you hear a little click. We thought there was something wrong with the recording, but we've listened to it in a lot of different places. Hiroaki Ohmori did not cut his sample correctly, so
no, even Electric Boogaloo, he warned us. He's like, hey, I'm sending this over. There's like this weird click in this track, but that's just how it is. And so, okay, yeah, sure. I mean, it doesn't really.
You kind of get used to it, yeah.
Yeah, I think of it like a cowbell. It doesn't really deter too far away from the nice parts of the track, and it's definitely in line. The vibe is still very much in similar to a North Breeze. It's a good tune. I enjoy it. Yeah, so like you were saying, it does the whole soundtrack does live in this kind of middle ground where it's there's kind of a nice almost
groove.
like a little groove breakbeat behind it, but then kind of floaty melody, kind of long elongated synths, and so we're going to kind of see that as we go through
airy,
the soundtrack.
Icy, that kind of thing. A lot of that sort of thing going on.
Yeah. Before we jump into our next track, let's kind of talk about the game a little bit, because it's a pretty impressive game for a bunch of university students who are brand new to the dev kit, obviously, because it's a new dev kit. But it's fairly basic as far as a futuristic racer goes, using 3D models, most similar to games like F-Zero X or Wipeout. We talked about that earlier. And it features all of the hallmarks of that genre, like the angular ships, hovercrafts, racing at high speeds around tracks, boost pads, jump, rough terrain, and a lot of different tricky corners that you have to maneuver around.
Yep. Lots of hairpins, square turns, lots of fast racing around crazy tracks that don't really make any kind of sense. I mean, in the game they do, but I mean, it's really cool, but overall it's not too complex. It's just 3 tracks per Grand Prix, and 3 of those. There's a blue Grand Prix that you start off with by default. You beat that, you get yellow. Beat yellow, then you can get red. That's pretty much the game. So there's also a practice mode. There's a time attack where you can race against a track ghost, a training, and a 2-player battle. And that's literally all of the modes that you have in the game. But, the core gameplay is pretty cool, but there's not a whole lot of flourish in it. I mean, still pretty impressive for an indie team, but,
right.
You kind of know what to expect.
The game itself features 6 different vehicles. There's Luster, Excel, Beta, Juster, Alpha, and the Suzuki. The hidden unlockable character isn't a car, but a man that runs around the courses instead.
Hilarious to watch.
Yeah, Suzuki is actually the protagonist of the team's earlier game, Yakata. And to unlock him, you have to beat the training missions with all the vehicles, including the Alpha car, which you unlock by finishing GP mode.
Yeah, it's a pretty basic game at its core, as we've mentioned. But what's really cool about it is they were able to get the game running at, I think, 60 frames per second. Every video I've seen looks super smooth. They're not doing a whole lot, like, in terms of, it's really just like the track and the vehicle. But still, I've played so many PlayStation 1 games that were 20, 30 frames per second. That would have been a pretty impressive feat to test out on the demo and see it just like silky smooth. And considering how limited the Net Yaroze was, that's definitely an accomplishment. And we haven't really talked about it yet, but we will come back and talk about what the platform was all about after this next track. And are you ready to jump into it, or did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No. Let's just drop right into it.
And the next track is Drop to the Sky.
That was my segue, dude. That was my segue.
I got it. I'm reading the same notes you are. All right. This is Drop to the Sky by Hiroaki Ohmori, composed for Hover Racing.
All right, that was Drop to the Sky, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori for Hover Racing.
That is probably one of my favorite tracks in the game.
Same here.
It's got like, I really love that kind of do-do-do-do-do, that sort of midline and the nice kind of drum and bass groove. I can definitely picture my car racing around, not hitting any walls, being a perfect lap, no mistakes, beating my best times. It really puts you in that mood for like that, getting in the zone for the racing mode.
See, because with this one, I really get that nice, almost like a hot air balloon ride through the.
Yeah, I don't know why that would be. I mean, it's not like both games came out in the same year, but
yeah, I know that sound exactly the same. No, it's a really good track. This is you kind of nailed it. I think that this is one of my favorite in the soundtrack as well. It's smooth. It's got like it doesn't have anything that's too overwhelming. So I think you can just kind of relax to it. But I just think it's a smooth track, and it transitions right into that intro again and kind of just gets you set up for another lap, I guess. Yeah.
And I feel like with this track especially, there's a lot of like, I don't know, it's soothing. I don't know. I maybe that's just the soundtrack in general, but I feel like they've done a really good job, or Hiroaki Ohmori has done a really good job of kind of setting this atmosphere. I mean, it's not super complex. I mean, again, I have the feeling this is probably one of his first serious music projects. I mean, he's probably written tracks before, but this was like, you can think of it like a small album. There's like 10 or 11 tracks, but there's maybe 6 or 7 full ones, and we're playing most of the longer tracks. But
right.
It's very consistent. His album that he released in 2011 is obviously a lot more advanced, but you can kind of hear the seeds of where his music is going. So, I mean, it's cool to see those early roots of people's creative journeys.
But I think what's interesting about this track too is that, or about the soundtrack, is that it's not too rock and roll. Like if we listen to Wipeout, right, that's kind of all over the place. That's like makes your heart race before you even start racing, right? The music is so intense, and this takes a lot more like the wind in your hair kind of.
Yeah, I got a lot more
feeling,
90s house influences. Like, the tempo's a little bit faster, but there's a few tracks in here that are very like kind of down tempo piano. But
I wouldn't put it in like the EDM category by any means.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Anyways, let's talk about this dev platform.
Yeah, Net Yaroze. What does that mean?
Well, it means let's do it on the net.
Not like that though.
Oh yeah. no, but it's like let's work
get together
online.
So now that we know what it means, the Net Yaroze was a promotional program and low-cost development kit from Sony that allowed hobbyist programmers to develop games for the PS1. It was launched in June of 96 in Japan and 97 in other countries. It was marketed in magazines, promoted in some universities, and was popular for aspiring game developers, generally at the high school and university level, people that were just kind of starting out. Right. It was not the first hobbyist console development program or platform. Actually, we looked this up. There's one for the PC Engine. It was
called the Devilo.
Yeah. It was. We saw this on the Wikipedia article, and we spent like a couple of hours looking this up. There was a demo disc with PC Engine Fan Volume 1, which included 2 homebrew games. One called Maru Maru, which is kind of a bad Breakout clone.
I beat it in like seriously like 3 minutes.
Did you? I didn't even bother playing. It looked like crap.
Yeah, it's like you won. I'm like, wait. That was it?
The other one, the creme de la creme of PC Engine, homebrew games, Frisbee Ken John, a 1-button game about a dog catching a frisbee. You jump.
It is the best.
And then you catch the frisbee in your mouth. That's the game.
I immediately fell in love with that beautiful, beautiful dog.
It's a German Shepherd, if you couldn't tell.
Well, I think they only had the pixels to make it a German Shepherd, but it was adorable, and we were like, oh man, like if there's a music in this game, it is a total win for us. We could play that right in the show. Unfortunately, no music.
I mean, there's like little jingles and stuff. The game came out, I think, in 1989. So, I think what's interesting about all of this is that obviously PC indie game development has been around for a long, long time, but consoles have been either prohibitively expensive or the dev kits were unavailable. So like this is the first one that had a lot of reasonable real effort behind it. Like Sony made a big push, and we actually saw some pretty cool stuff from it. And we'll talk about some of that later.
Yeah, so the Net Yaroze program was created by Ken Kutaragi, dubbed the father of the PlayStation. You probably know him a lot better for creating the Super Nintendo sound chip, the SPC 700.
That's how I know him, yeah.
Or that he was the CEO of Sony Entertainment America from 97 to 2006. Maybe one of those.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of these guys that like just showed up all over the place throughout Sony. I know he was...
Brilliant
absolutely,
engineer.
Yeah. Involved with the PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, probably more in an advisory role going on from there, but very, very much in the DNA of the company.
Very much so. And the Net Yaroze dev kit cost about $750, roughly $1,200 now, and was available primarily by mail order. Available in 3 different regional variants: one for Japan, one for North America, and then one for both Europe and Australia. And we talked about this earlier. Compared to most professional dev kits, were usually in like the $10,000 range. This was cheap. The target audience was kids,
not kids, but
young developers, a lot of these people would mention in interviews how that even $750 felt like a reach, but especially for a broke high school student or a college student, this was the great option to really get your hands in the platform and kind of sink your toes into development for a game. And it was still a fairly impressive package, despite not having all the fancy bells and whistles of professional dev kits. It contained a black debug PS1 unit, and I was so envious of that. I wanted one so bad. It had a cable to connect a PC and a CD with dev tools on it. And the dev tools were compatible with both IBM PCs and Macintoshes, and also PC 98s in Japan. So in addition to the unit and dev tools, Sony maintained a dedicated Usenet group, which allowed Net Yaroze owners to share their homemade games, programming tips, and ask questions to Sony's technical support staff. Unfortunately, access to the Usenet groups was restricted by the kit's region, which mostly prevented devs from collaborating across regions without great effort, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's a bit of a missed opportunity, but I understand why they did it, because it's like if you opened up a post that was written in Japanese and you only speak English, you'd be like, oh, what's going on? I don't understand this.
Well, I'm out. See ya. No, but I remember going to the website. This is something like you could build in 5 seconds, but it was so impressive at the time. It had this really cool font. It had like different things you can click on and kind of learn more about the program. And then the dev tools were really interesting. And I didn't really ever see these, but according to some of the interviews I saw, it was as simple as compiling your code, building a binary and uploading it to the Usenet groups. And so then anybody could actually just try it out. They could, download it, put it on their Net Yaroze and just play it out right there.
Yeah, I've read a number of interviews from devs that were making games during that time, and everybody has said that it was missing some of the advanced features, but it was really a fully featured thing. And for somebody who was just getting started, it was more than enough to get a complete game.
Right. So games for the Net Yaroze were limited to the same computing restrictions as the consumer model. Code, graphics, audio samples, all those libraries had to fit in 2 megs of RAM, megabyte of VRAM, and also half a meg of sound RAM. So while they had strict limitations, they were kind of still on par with what consumers had and could really make impressive titles, kind of like Hover Racing. I mean, even though it has some rough edges, for what it is, it's actually a very awesome feat.
Yeah, I mean, the games were generally more simple, but if you imagine your favorite PlayStation game cut down to like an hour, many of them looked as good and played as well. I mean, the more talented developers were able to get some really cool stuff out of it.
Yep. So let's jump over to our next track here. This is Mysterious Wave, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori.
That was Mysterious Wave, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori, and that was from the Net Yaroze game Hover Racing.
Cool track. I couldn't figure out what that sample actually says. It sounded like baked tofu, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't it.
I couldn't understand what it was saying either. I'd have to listen to it a little bit more if I really wanted to figure it out.
Yeah, singled out, yeah. I like this one kind of less than the other ones, but it's still good.
Yeah, what I was really thinking about, and something we kind of forgot to mention is, we mentioned that a lot of these games had to fit in a pretty small area, and in order to do that, the music was MIDI. So they would have like small little sample libraries and then just trigger them with MIDI. So that's why you're hearing a lot of the same kinds of percussion samples and that kind of icy bell-like synth and a few other things. I mean, if you kind of listen to it objectively as just like music, it's probably not all that impressive, but considering the game, I think had to be like 2 megabytes. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, these guys are still learning the ropes too, I can't really hold it against them, because I mean, like, there's plenty of MIDI soundtracks on PlayStation that are off the charts great, a lot actually, and so like I wouldn't say that.
No, I don't. Yeah, it's more just like, they were still able to get a lot out of very little, so I got to commend them for that. Absolutely. I think what I like about this track is that it does take a little bit of a different approach. So earlier in this in the episode, we were talking about how the game or the soundtrack actually kind of takes this middle ground where it's not like overly rushed feeling, but it's also not like completely like, slouch in your chair, laid back. This track is probably one of the more intense ones. I want to say it's one of the longer ones too, but it does kind of pick up the pace a little bit. So I like that. Yeah, it does have a different energy. It kind of breaks away for those samples and the more of the percussion to poke out. So definitely trying something a little bit different, which I always appreciate when people are experimenting with different musical techniques. So yeah.
Yep.
Not too much else to say about that one. We were talking about Net Yaroze sort of as a platform, but I think it's kind of cool to talk about some of the games that came out of this. Like, Hover Racing is definitely one of the more impressive games when you think about it as a complete product, but it was not the only one. There's a lot of cool tech demos. There was a lot of experimentation, very similar to the indie game explosion during the DOS era. And, as we're about to say, it did kickstart a few careers. Some of the more notable examples were, I don't know if anybody played the game Devil Dice. It was originally a Japanese Net Yaroze project. Eventually became a retail PlayStation 1 game after Sony picked it up. Although, unfortunately, the Net Yaroze version seems to be lost. But a really cool fact about that is, outside of the FMV and the music, everything in the game is stored in the PS1's RAM, like the Net Yaroze games. They already kind of coded it in a certain way. So you
could just take out the CD and put in your own audio.
Pretty much.
Your own audio disc.
They'd already kind of built it with these really tight constraints. So it's like, why not just do that in the retail game? It's not like the person playing the game really cares. Oh, and so the company that made the game, Shift, they went on to work on a number of notable games, getting like more impressive as time went on. They had the sequel Bombastic for PS2. This is sort of like a puzzle action game. You ride around on a set of die and they, connect to each other. And they made some action RPGs like the God Eater series, Freedom Wars, and Code Vein, which I think came out like last year. So they're still in it.
Freedom Wars is awesome too.
Yeah, and God Eater too. I played the first and the second one quite a bit on my Vita.
Me too. That was one of the Vita games I picked up. I was like, oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. Another big release on this was Total Soccer from developer Exient Entertainment. It went on to become a series of retail games for PC, Game Boy, and a lot of other platforms. Game Boy Color. The team worked on tons of sports titles. DS, Game Boy Advance. Now they're making mobile games. They're not like super ambitious. A lot of times they do like mobile downports of bigger series, but it's a consistent studio. They've been putting out games for almost like 20 years now. So
right.
Yeah.
The Total Soccer series is kind of a big deal. I mean, it looks a lot like Sensi Soccer or Dino Dini, something like that. But I
think it started as a clone actually of Sensible Soccer.
Yeah, I think so. And so, but the fact that it made it to all these other platforms, I mean, people are paying for it, and it's probably a good game. I don't think I remember playing it. Could have at one point come across it, but yeah, I would love to give it a shot after this. I was looking at some screenshots and it looks pretty cool. So yeah, Yeah. Now, there were a few more games that didn't make it to like commercial releases, but are still worth mentioning. We were kind of going through the list. We found Terra Incognita, a short but impressive 3D action RPG similar to Landstalker. And one of the devs, Mitsuru Kamiyama, went on to direct several games, including Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles at Square Enix. And the team also released an odd but impressive short demo called Fatal Fantasy VII, which pretty accurately recreates Cloud and the spirit of walking around pre-rendered backgrounds. It's all really weird and surreal.
Yeah, you start off in like a bathroom and then you step out and there's like a skull vomiting a bridge. But like the graphics look just like FF7, like, you know, the Popeye arms and everything.
Yep. There is Blitter Boy, Operation Monster Mall, developed by Chris Chadwick. And that's a top-down action game, kind of like a simplified version of Smash TV mixed with Bomberman. It's also a very impressive game. It won the 1998 Game Developer UK competition. And Chris has given a few interviews about this point in time where he talks about his experiences working with the platform. Finally, Time Slip is a platformer where you use a basic replay time mechanic to guide your snail through different obstacles. And the game was re-released in 2011 for the Xbox Live Indie Games Marketplace on the 360.
Yeah, so some of these later games are definitely not like huge hits, but you can see that there were some things that came out of this. And obviously, like we said, there were dozens and dozens of these like Net Yaroze projects. These were just some of the more notable ones.
I wonder how many of these are still floating around, like, you know, you can easily pick them up. I'm curious. I hadn't really thought about it.
I mean, there's a lot of demo discs, and actually that was one of the last things I was going to mention about this. And what's impressive about a lot of these games is that we do have a lot of them preserved because they were bundled on demo discs that came with game magazines from about 97 to about 2004. In fact, the last official PlayStation magazine in the UK, issue number 108, had a compilation with a number of Net Yaroze games. I think I've seen compilations, something like 80 or so of these altogether. I'm sure there were many more beyond that, but even still, like, it's not too hard to find those demo discs and kind of play around and look back a little bit in history, just kind of for your own entertainment's sake. Most of them won't keep your interest too long, but some of the ones towards the beginning of the lists are pretty exciting, like, you know, like Hover Racing.
Wow.
And, you know, while there was no direct follow-up to the Net Yaroze from Sony, probably the closest spiritual successor is Microsoft's XNA platform, which was for PC and Xbox 360. That was about a decade later, and they provided a similar set of tools that were freeware and helped a lot of indie devs get their start, you know, and it inspired a new generation of developers. In fact, games like Celeste, Stardew Valley, Rogue Legacy, and Bastion all started on XNA. So,
well, Celeste started on Pico 8.
Did it? Oh, that's right. Oh, I think the first beta of like the full game might have started on it.
Oh, yeah. Like the console version.
Yeah. But I mean, even if I don't have that totally correct, I mean, a lot of these other games definitely, I know Bastion for sure did. And, you know, it wasn't that long ago, right? Like 2012 or 13 when that game came out. And
right. So, there wasn't many indie games at that time. Even like we look like it's not that long ago.
I know, right? But if you make the tools, people will make use of them, and cool stuff will come out, which is, I think, what to me is the coolest part about this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to provide a little update here. I was looking at on eBay just how much Net Yaroze would go for, between $2,000 to $4,000. To buy one.
It's about the same price as it was when it first came out.
Yeah, condition new. So maybe they had a bunch of these sitting around. So yeah, I don't buy it.
There's a lot more.
I should have bought one back in in 1997 for half the price.
There's so many easier tools to use these days for making games. So I mean, it's probably cool as a historical thing at this point. But yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, you ready to move on?
I am, yeah. Let's move on to our second to last track, right?
Yeah, this is Freezing Moment, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori, and this is the first one and only track also composed by Tohru Kawakami.
That was Freezing Moment, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori and Tohru Kawakami for the PlayStation 1 Net Yaroze game Hover Racing.
I wish we would have heard more from Tohru Kawakami. Because I like this track a lot. It's different. It's got a little different flair to it. It still kind of follows a lot of the same, I guess, ideas from the other tracks. So I'm sure that Hiroaki Ohmori had a lot of influence on it, but like there is kind of like a chili spice to it, I guess.
Yeah, the percussion on this one's a little bit more off kilter, gives a little bit more like, sense of time is out of place a little bit more anxiety, tempo's up, using the same exact sounds as before, but a little bit of a different flavor, as you said, a little spice.
Right. So I played the game and I don't remember any icy levels. They all kind of look the same a little bit to me, but I spent a lot more time on, dogs catching frisbees. But a really interesting soundtrack, and I'm glad that we went through today. Not so much. I mean, the soundtrack is fun. It's nice to listen to, and I invite you guys to go to YouTube and check out, or however means you plan on listening to it, the whole soundtrack. Maybe we could do something like a listen together kind of thing, listen along or whatever you call it in Discord or something. But I think that what's more important here is just the package as a whole, this kind of time capsule of information from an indie developer or a team of indie developers. Yeah,
we always see these. One of the things we do a lot on the show is we seek out like the best of the best of maybe a particular composer or a console or an era. And it took time for that composer to get there, right? Nobody starts at that level. Everybody has to work up to it. So, this might not be everybody's favorite soundtrack, but I found it really cool to like see this, just the excitement around the Net Yaroze platform, indie developers learning these tools for the first time and just, honing their craft. And for me, like that time capsule, that sort of, that is almost more interesting than it being the best soundtrack in the world.
Well, when I listen to the soundtrack, I actually have a lot of these thoughts about like the dev and stuff going through when I'm listening to it, and that like makes it really special. So
definitely,
I do want to say though, if you are interested in playing the game, if you go to PS Dev, we can put a link, I guess, and I'll say what the problem with that would be is since it's open, it's a public game. There is one of the forum members on there extracted the binary from the demo disc, and you can actually just burn it to a CD and play it on your PlayStation or play it in an emulator, however you want.
Yeah, and you might be able to find one of the demo discs we mentioned. If we can find that, we'll post a link. I think those should be fair game for the most part.
I think they're on like archive.org, so you can just do a search for like PlayStation Underground 2.2. Should show up. Mm-hmm. So, today we covered Hover Racing on the PlayStation 1's Net Yaroze platform, composed by Hiroaki Ohmori and Tohru Kawakami. Just that last track. Actually, if you want to know more about the show, where can you find us?
You can find us online at pixelatedaudio.com for show notes and the track list. We can also be found on Twitter at pixelatedaudio, on YouTube. We've been uploading a little bit more there lately, and also on our Discord channel. Come join us whenever you like. We're always talking about video game music of every different era.
And pretty much everything else.
That too, yeah.
It's a pretty open discussion there. Anyways, if you like the show, please, we invite you to leave feedback on either the website, YouTube, Discord, email us directly, or give us a rating on iTunes. That's super appreciated. If you haven't taken the time, spend 3 seconds and do it. We got a lot of episodes if you're new to the show to check out. So we just did a few really cool recent ones.
Yes, we had Symphony on our show for 198X and Airport CEO, two very different and two very great soundtracks. And if you're really nostalgic for electronic music from 1997 on the PS1, check out episodes 31, Ghost in the Shell, or 126, Kaze no Notum, that hot air balloon simulator that everyone knows and loves, I think.
Awesome. So we have one last track taking out the show. This is Groove on Night. This is a really mellow, but also groovy little track. Again, big thanks to Electric Boogaloo for providing the tracks and helping with the research on this one to make the show possible. Very awesome of you. Thank you guys so much for listening. And we've got a really exciting show lined up after this. So check the feed. We'll let you know when it's out, or you just subscribe to the show on iTunes. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you back in a few weeks for the next episode.